All right. So we're going to do the idea that we did a little bit in Photoshop. Do you remember Dina, I think was her name? We put her on a different background, like a sunset background, and she had flowing hair and all that. So you can see they gave us a model with all this flowing hair. And also, when we look at the background, if we were to try to select that with the magic wand, it's not all exactly one color. The gray kind of changes. So we're going to have to go through that process of selecting her and then doing the refine and mask edge on her hair to get that transparency through her hair so it looks realistic. We're going to put her on that other image, the second one that we downloaded. She's ultimately going to be on this background. And then we're going to make it look as if she really was taken in that setting by like blending the colors. We kind of did that with Dina also, and we're going to learn a way to do it here. So back in the original picture of her, your first step is going to be that we want to select her, and we're going to use the quick selection tool, and we're just going to use kind of a big cursor, and we're going to quickly run that over her and select her. But what we don't want to do is, okay, here's my original selection. Number one, make sure you get her hand in her hip, like I didn't, so I'm going to have to do that again. Don't worry about the gray space between her arm there. But the thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to have our selection way out here on her loose hair. We want to push that in to where her hair is not transparent. So if your selection went too far like mine did, you hold down the Option key and then you get the minus, and then you just kind of come to these outside edges and push this back in so that it's not on her, the transparent part of her hair. Do you have the selection tool going? Yeah, so my marching ants were way out here, and I want it to be in where her hair is solid, not where it's transparent. So if you hold Option and bring your cursor out to the right here where there originally was and start pushing this way with it, it'll push those marching ants back towards her hair. So we're going to tweak this and make it better, but get a decent selection so that we do have a hard edge around most of her and where her hair is the darkest. So these fringy pieces out here we don't have selected, and there's actually a fringy piece over on this other side that I don't have my marching ants on. All right, what we need to do now is we need to knock out the center part of her arm here as best we can. So we're going to switch to the Magic Wand tool, which is nested with the quick selection. Check your tolerance before we do this. Make sure it's at one of the higher numbers up here in the bar, and make sure that contiguous is checked. That means that they have to be touching, because we don't want it to grab all of the gray pixels anywhere, just what's touching where we get. And also, we want to subtract from this selection. So we're going to hold down the Option key, and then we're going to click once with the Magic Wand inside of her arm on the gray area, and that's going to make a selection right here. Magic Wand, hold down Option, and click inside here. And that's going to take it away from our original selection. Huh? You just rebooted?
No, somebody just started installing and then it shut off.
Watch along, follow along. Just watch. We've done this before. By the time it reboots, I'll be through this. All right, everybody got your ants where they need to be? Okay. So what we did was we made the quick selection, which is always adding. So as we run around, it's adding to it, adding to it. And then to subtract from it, we had to hold the Option key and just use another selection method, the wand. And we selected a gray pixel, and it did all the gray pixels touching it that it could. It's not perfect inside there, but it's a good job. All right. All right, once we have our marching ants, we're going to go to the top option bar, and at the far right, there's a square box that says Select and Mask. We're going to click on that. And then at the far right, we have different views. So the one that I'm in right now is the overlay view. You can see onion skin, marching ants, on black, on white, black and white. Switch to that view, black and white, because that shows your mask as it is right now. Remember, black is what we are blocking out, white is what we can see, and it's a hard edge. So there's no blending, no transparency. It's just a hard edge. And that's good in most places. We shouldn't have transparent edges on her hips or her arms or anything else, right? Those should be hard black and white. Where we should have transparency, though, is up here in her hair area. So we need to deal with that. All right, first thing we're going to do is, if edge detection isn't spun open right here, spin that open. And then click on the Smart Radius button. Nothing's going to happen until we do a few more things. Now, to see how this can work, we're going to extremely drag this radius slider to the right. So crank it up, and we're going to start to see how smart this is and how it finds edges. So at a high number, we're seeing that we got that awesome transparency in her hair where we probably want it, but we also got some transparency down here on her hand, maybe a little on her hips down here, and guess what? They aren't transparent, right? We can't see through her hand or her hips. So this is a little too far. We're going to back it down until we can kind of see her hands and her hips area looking pretty solid. As you're dragging it, it won't show you a proper preview until you let go of the dragging it, so you kind of have to let go every now and then. We're going to take it to about 60-ish. That seems to be a decent point where we have some transparency, but most of the areas that need to be solid black and white are. All right, if you want to see this in another view, we're going to switch over to the overlay. And in the overlay view, the parts that are selected appear in full color, and the parts that aren't selected are red. So we can see there's some full color here, this gray is showing through, so the mask isn't great right here. And because her hair is red, it's not perfectly masked yet up here. We've got some issues. So we can kind of see her body looks fine. We just need to deal with a little bit of the hair area. We need to go and fix it. All right. I'm going to switch back to the black on white overlay for this next step. And from here we need to do some tweaking. So at the far left we have a new toolbar that has been set up specific to this refine and mask. And if we look at the options, we have quick selection, then we have refine edge brush tool. That's the one we want to use, so click that if it wasn't already. My cursor's a little too small for what I want to do. And now I know that there's some hair to the right of this that I haven't found, so I'm just going to paint in this area with this brush until I see it come back. If you want to switch to a different view while you're doing this, maybe like this overlay view is a little bit better, wherever you see red and you know there's some hair, you might want to paint over it to get it to come through. So I cleaned up a little by her arm. Anytime you see that gray showing through from the behind the scenes, you need to clean that up a little bit. So do your best with this tool to bring back some of her hair, that's the transparent areas. And then all right, so once you get her hair showing through, it doesn't matter what view you're in, this overlay or the black and white. Before we move on, the thing we want to do at about halfway down on this right-hand panel, there is an area that says decontaminate colors, and it's a checkbox. I want you to click on that. In this image, she was shot on a neutral gray background in a studio, so the lighting is good, and there's not really going to be any color casts. However, when we do our next experiment and I set up the green screen, and we take pictures under these fluorescent lights on this green screen, a lot of you that have especially blonde hair, when we take the picture, you're going to get like a green cast in your hair from the green screen. So this decontaminate colors is going to pull out that weird green look. So it doesn't hurt to always check this box down here. And then the last step that we want to do is, where did my thing go here? Do you guys have a Dropbox? No, you don't either. What the heck's going on? Oh, sorry. I can't even see what I'm looking at. So it's not way at the bottom because there's all this dead gray space here, but shortly after decontaminate colors, there is a drop-down box that says output to, and there's a whole bunch of different options. So now that you've made this mask, how do you want to output it? As a new layer, as a new layer with a layer mask, as a new document, or a new document with a layer mask? The version we want is the one that's highlighted. A new layer with a layer mask. So make sure that that is chosen, and then at the bottom say OK. That's going to bring us back into Photoshop, and it's going to put a whole new layer on top of our original photo, and it's going to have her masked out the way we just did the mask in that Refine Edge mask. From here, we probably need to clean up our mask just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Option key and we're going to click on the layer mask itself in the layers down here, and that's going to show us that on our picture. Now we need to look at, are there any areas that are transparent that shouldn't be? In my case, her hand down here has some transparency. That shouldn't be that way. So we're going to go in and we're going to clean up this mask with our black and white paintbrush. If there are areas that should be black, we're going to paint them black. If there are areas that should be white, we're going to paint them white. And here's a helpful hint. So get your brush tool first. Letter B will get your brush tool. Make sure that your foreground and background colors are defaulted to black and white down at the bottom of your toolbar. Letter D will make sure that they're default, and then X switches you from white being the foreground to black being the foreground, whatever you need. And then we're going to paint with white wherever we need to. The cool thing here is with our brush mode, up at this top option bar, we have blending modes for the brush. Normal is the one that is set right now, but we can change this. And if we change this to be overlay, up at this top drop down, as we paint with white, it's not going to go out of the lines, if you will. So as I'm painting down here on her hand, as I'm going over the edge into the black, it's not actually painting white there because I'm in this overlay blend mode. So it's a very easy way to go around what should be your hard edges and paint them white. Take away any transparency where there shouldn't be. So on these hard edges, make sure it's a hard black to white. And then where her hair is, obviously we're going to leave it as is. But in this overlay mode, you don't have to be as careful. If I weren't in that and I were painting with white and I got sloppy and I painted out here, my white mask would come out here also because I would have painted with white. Okay, so you clean up your mask the best you can. And when you're happy with it, you can option click on that layer again, on the mask, I'm sorry, to turn off that big preview to get back to your main picture. And now we have her masked out quite perfectly in a way that we would want to put her on a new background. Everybody at this point okay with it? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this layer mask, but only the mask, by making sure that it's highlighted, and we're going to drag it down to the trash can. And when we do that, it's going to ask us a question. So click on the layer mask, drag it down to the trash, and it's going to say, do you want us to apply this before we remove it? Yes, we do. So say apply, and that turns this layer into a transparent background with just the girl on it. It took the mask off, but applied those changes. So now we have the version of her that we can put in our other picture. So get your Move tool, and if you guys remember back from Photoshop, when we move from one document to another, we can click on her, hold down our mouse, drag it up to that tab, don't let go of your mouse, and once that tab becomes active and the picture shows up, drag down into the picture, and then let go. That's an easy way of moving things. So I'm going to drag her up to this other window, wait till it shows up, drag down, let go of my mouse. And then you can position her, and obviously she's a little large, so remember how to transform her, Command T. And now, in the new version of Photoshop, it's always scaling proportionately. You no longer have to hold the Shift key to keep her proportionate, which is opposite from what it was all my life. And if you hold Shift, it works the other way. So it's automatically going to proportionately transform. So get her a little bit smaller and position her in this image. All right. This is nothing that you need to do, but with your move key, or actually we need to do another Command T to get the bounding box around her. If you ever need to do this, this is a good tip to know that it exists. If we wanted to flip her so it looked like her shoulder, she was standing the opposite way or posing the opposite way, we're going to right-click inside one of these bounding boxes, and we get all these options, scale, rotate. We're going to do the flip horizontal, and we're just going to have her standing the other direction. So if you ever need to do that, it's an easy way of doing it. And then either hit return on your keyboard or the check mark way up at the top. All right, now when you mask out people, there might be, if we zoom in really tight on this, I'm going to try to zoom in, there might be some white pixels around her edge. It actually mine looks pretty good, but one step that you can always take, if you see that, it's called matting, and we want to get rid of that. So make sure that her layer is the layer that's selected in the Layers panel, and then go under the Layer drop-down menu, go way to the bottom where it says Matting, and then we're going to choose Defringe, and we're going to defringe it by 1 pixel. So especially when you're doing your green screen, you might see little green square pixels on the edge here of that fringe, and this is how you can get rid of them. So defringe by 1 pixel. And then as we look at her, she looks good, but maybe her hair looks a little lightish, not quite as realistic as we would hope. So one way we can stack these effects is to just duplicate her layer, and it's going to put a stack of her right on top. Command J is the thing that duplicates that exact layer. And did you see how her hair kind of filled in when you did that? I'll undo it and do it. Command J. If duplicating her layer gave too much of an effect on her transparent areas, it's not affecting anything about her because that was full transparency. We could see that completely, so duplicating that didn't change it. The areas that it added to and improved are her hair and ears where it got a little thicker. If it's too much, you can just back off the opacity of that layer, so that new background 2, I'm just going to pull down the opacity of that a little bit to make it more realistic. And then if you're happy with it, when you have her the way you want her, we're going to just flatten this layer 2 down onto this other layer of her. We're not going to flatten the whole picture. We're just going to take the active layer and push it down, flatten it down 1. Command E is the shortcut that flattens your current layer with the one below it. So we now have her with a little bit thicker hair in those transparent areas. And then the final step is if we wanted to make this look really realistic, like she was shot, this was shot in that condition. It wasn't in a studio with funky lighting. So there's kind of a color cast to this background that she's on. And in Photoshop, we did that with this match color thing. We went through that whole process. We're going to do a different version on this one. And how we're going to do that is we're going to put marching ants around her. We're going to load her selection. So in this layer panel that's her, we are going to hold Command and we're going to click on her thumbnail in the layer panel. And that's going to put the marching ants around her selection. And then we need to add a new blank layer to our stack. So at the bottom right of your layer panel, click on the new blank layer, and that's going to add layer 1. Right above her, it's empty. Our marching ants are now on layer 1. There's nothing on layer 1, but that's where our marching ants now are. We're going to take our eyedropper tool and we're going to sample a color from this background. So with the eyedropper tool, we're going to come into this background picture and we're going to sample like the ground color, kind of this darker tan down here. And that's going to put it in our foreground. So I just sampled the tan like kind of to the left of the copyright down here, the darker tan. So that's now our foreground color. And to get your selection to fill with your foreground color, the shortcut on the keyboard is Option Delete. And that just filled all the marching ants on that layer with that background color. Now any guess what we're going to do? Opacity could be, or what's the other one that would help mix these two?
Blending mode.
Blending mode, yep. The blend mode is the one that we're going to use, and we're going to tell that to be a blend mode of not normal. Normal isn't very good here. We're going to take it to color. So we're going to blend it with that color, and then, you guessed it, we're going to play with the opacity because that's not really how she looks. So we're going to pull down the opacity quite a bit. We're probably going to go down to about 30% is what I'm seeing in the book, but it would be whatever works. And it's just taking that color tint from that scene and kind of toning her to look more natural in that setting. So when you get that to where you want it with the blend mode of color and an opacity that works for you, you would then flatten this layer 1 onto her layer because we don't want them accidentally coming apart. So Command E will flatten your current layer with the one below it. And you are done. You have made a composite photo that looks very realistic with her hair having transparency. Command D will stop your marching ants, and it looks pretty darn good. It looks like it was shot in that scene. So, this tutorial is in your Kelby book. It starts on page 211. If you need to reference it while you're working through your own tutorial. How many of you brought cameras today? Not everybody? Okay. I'm going to set up the green screen, and then you're going to have to get somebody in here to pose for you on the green screen. And then you can go ahead and have fun with it. So I've seen people like falling off the Grand Canyon, running from a bear. You know, they don't have to just stand there and look serious. They can be like afraid of something and you can put a dinosaur behind them or whatever you want to do. So your in-class assignment is going to be, and if you don't have a camera, have somebody else use their camera, take the shot, have them send it to you. You're going to composite your picture onto a background using this method, and you are going to send me the flattened JPEG. I don't need to see the layers. I'll be able to tell when I look at it if there's green around it. You're going to really want to be careful when you do this process of decontaminating the colors because there will be a green cast, and you're going to want to do that defringing because depending on how good your selection was, you're going to have green pixels around the edges of people. Okay? All right. I will set up the